I was 16, a curious teenager lured by the promise of forbidden knowledge. The YouTube videos had piqued my fascination, painting the dark web as a lawless, chaotic space where anything could be found from illicit goods to dark secrets. The Tor browser, a labyrinth in software, opened a portal into this clandestine world. It felt like stepping through a veil, the familiar, bright interface of my everyday browser replaced by a stark, minimalist screen. The silence was broken by a hushed whirring as the software worked its magic, obscuring my location and identity. I was a ghost in the digital ether. At first, it was exhilarating. I navigated through a maze of onion sites, their names nonsensical strings of letters and numbers, each link a doorway to a new, unknown space. I explored forums dedicated to conspiracies, stumbled upon hidden marketplaces selling stolen goods, and read chilling accounts of cybercrime. It was a world teeming with shadows, a world I felt both drawn to and repelled by. Then it happened. Browsing through a site dedicated to forbidden knowledge, I clicked on a link that seemed innocuous enough, a simple title. The Price of Curiosity. It led to a website unlike any I'd seen before. The color scheme was monochrome, an oppressive black and murky gray, the font jagged and unsettling. The site felt cold, devoid of any warmth, an echo chamber of my deepest fears. I spent a few minutes scrolling through the site, a disturbing mix of cryptic messages and unsettling images. Suddenly, a notification popped onto my screen. It was a simple message, a choice. Accept and continue. Or exit. My fingers hesitated, a sense of foreboding tightening in my chest. Curiosity, that insatiable hunger for the unknown, trumped my fear. I clicked accept. The screen flickered, and a box appeared, demanding my age. I typed in 18, the age required to access the site, though I knew I was lying. A feeling of unease settled upon me, but the allure of the unknown was too strong to resist. And then it started. The video. A stark, grainy image filled my screen, a scene seemingly ripped from a nightmare. A desolate desert stretched out under a brutal sun, the air shimmering with heat. A beat-up car screeched to a halt, its doors slamming closed with a muffled thud. Two figures, bound and gagged, were thrown out of the car, their bodies landing with sickening thumps on the parched earth. The scene became a blur of terror. The two figures, their faces contorted in pain and fear, were doused with gasoline. The flames erupted, consuming them in a horrifying inferno. Their screams were muffled by their gags, their struggles becoming desperate flailing as the fire consumed them. I watched, frozen in horror, as the flames danced around the figures, their bodies gradually consumed by the relentless fire. The smell of burning flesh seemed to permeate the air in my room, the heat of the flames a tangible presence. And then silence. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring into the black screen, a chill coursing through my body. It was like a dam had broken. The fear, the terror, the revulsion, all poured out, a torrent of emotions I had never felt before. My hands trembled, my heart pounded against my ribs, my breath came in ragged gasps. The dark web, once a source of fascination, now felt like a monstrous entity, a beast that had claimed its first victim, me. I shut down the computer, the image of the burning figures still seared into my memory. I couldn't sleep, the haunting scene replaying in my mind over and over. The dark web, once a source of thrilling, forbidden knowledge, had become a terrifying reminder of the depths of human depravity. Days turned into weeks, the experience lingering like a bad dream. I avoided the dark web, the urge to explore its shadowy corners extinguished by the horrifying truth it had revealed. My curiosity had been quenched, replaced by a sense of dread. The chilling scene on the dark web became a constant, unwelcome companion, a ghost in the machine of my mind. It was a reminder of the darkness lurking beneath the surface of the internet, a stark reminder that the world was not always the safe, predictable place I had imagined it to be. A year later, I stumbled upon a news article, a story about a brutal murder, the details chillingly familiar. Two men, found dead in a desert, their bodies burned beyond recognition. The article mentioned a disturbing video recording that had surfaced online, showing the gruesome details of their demise. The memory of the dark web video, a hidden, forgotten corner of my mind, came flooding back. It was the same scene, the same figures, the same horrific act of violence. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had witnessed a real crime, a horrific act that had left 2 men dead. My fascination with the dark web had faded, replaced by a sense of guilt, a feeling of complicity. I had been a voyeur, a passive viewer of a real-life horror. I had not reported the video, not alerted the authorities. I had simply shut down my computer and tried to forget. But I couldn't forget. The dark web had left its mark, a scar on my psyche, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows of the internet. It had taught me a valuable lesson, a lesson learned at a very high price, the cost of curiosity. I never went back to the dark web. It was a place of shadows and secrets, a world I was no longer willing to explore. The dark web had opened a door I had slammed shut, forever haunted by the glimpse of darkness it had shown me. And while the faces of the burned men faded over time, the chilling reality of the dark web remained, a stark reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of the internet, and the dangers of unquenchable curiosity. A shiver ran down my spine as I clicked the link, the cursor hovering over the abyss like a harbinger of doom. With a mix of morbid fascination and trepidation, I entered the virtual chamber of death, a sanctuary for the condemned. Row after row of profiles stretched before me, each a grim testament to a life gone astray. The faces of the condemned stared back at me, their expressions frozen in a haunting tableau of regret, desolation, and acceptance. I could almost hear their voices echoing through the void, their final words etched into the fabric of the digital realm. I stand here today, on the brink of oblivion, wrestling with a symphony of emotions. Remorse gnaws at my soul, a relentless torment for the life I took. I pray for forgiveness, though I know it may never come. Farewell, my shattered world. As darkness consumes me, I find solace in the flicker of a single candle. I was once a beacon of hope, but now I am merely a footnote in the tapestry of tragedy. May my death serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the fragility of life. My name is lost to the annals of infamy, but my crime will forever haunt me. In the depths of my despair, I found a glimmer of redemption. I am ready to face the void, knowing that my actions have forever altered the course of destiny. As I delved deeper into the abyss, the words of the condemned began to weave themselves around my consciousness like a ghostly shroud. Their stories of broken dreams, shattered lives, and the inevitable march towards oblivion left an indelible mark upon my soul. I am a product of a broken society, a victim of circumstance and shattered dreams. I made choices that I deeply regret, but I am not the monster they made me out to be. Farewell, cruel world. May your judgment be tempered with mercy. Inmate number 007750, Mary Smith. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was an accident, a moment of madness that spiraled out of control. I am paying the ultimate price for a mistake, but I hope that one day, people will understand that my heart was not filled with malice. I have lived a life of violence, a life filled with darkness. But in the face of my impending doom, I find a strange sense of tranquility. I am ready to lay down my burden and embrace the unknown. Farewell, my fellow travelers. With each passing moment, the words of the condemned became more personal, more haunting. Their voices seemed to whisper from beyond the grave, pleading for redemption, forgiveness, or simply understanding. I felt an overwhelming sense of empathy for these lost souls, their pain and despair becoming a visceral weight upon my heart. As the night wore on, I found myself drawn to one particular profile. It was that of a man named David Mendoza, inmate number 007942. His final statement seemed to resonate with me on a profound level, striking a chord that reverberated through the depths of my being. I do not seek pity or absolution. I am guilty of heinous crimes that have cast a shadow upon humanity. But as I prepare to meet my Maker, I find solace in the small acts of kindness that I have shown others during my time on earth. I pray that my legacy will not be defined solely by my transgressions, but by the glimmers of compassion that I have left behind. David Mendoza's words lingered in my mind long after I had closed the website. I could not shake the feeling that his story was a reflection of the human condition itself, a testament to the darkness that can reside within us all, but also to the flicker of hope that can endure even in the face of despair. As the first rays of dawn pierced through my window, I realized that my journey into the darkest penumbra of the human soul had irrevocably changed me. The echoes of the condemned would forever be etched into the fabric of my memory, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion. And so, with a heavy heart and a newfound understanding of the human spirit, I left the dark web behind, knowing that the final statements of death row inmates would continue to haunt me long into the future, a poignant reminder of the darkness and the light that can coexist within us all. When I was a junior in high school, I would often find myself drawn to the allure of the unknown. The draw of the forbidden fascinated me, and I felt a constant need to know more, to see more, to explore more. It was during this time that I first discovered the deep web. At first, I was hesitant to venture into this mysterious and largely uncharted corner of the internet. But my curiosity eventually got the better of me, and I found myself downloading the Tor browser and entering a world that was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I remember feeling a thrill as I navigated through the deep web, my heart racing with excitement as I stumbled upon site after site that was hidden from the rest of the world. I was drawn to the taboo and gory side of the deep web, seeking out the darkest and most shocking content that I could find. I told myself that I was just a curious teenager, that I was simply trying to see if the bad stuff was real. But little did I know, I was about to get more than I bargained for. It was during one of my late-night deep web sessions that I stumbled across an old website with gore in the title. I can't remember the exact name, it might have been Gore-chan or something similar, but I remember feeling a shiver run down my spine as I clicked on the link. The website was a horror show. There were chat boards, comments, sections, and even GIFs, all dedicated to the most gruesome and disturbing content imaginable. I scrolled through the site, my eyes wide with shock and disgust, as I took in the brutal and sickening images that filled the screen. And then I saw it. A GIF of a small dog, shaking and terrified, its fur matted with blood and its skin torn and ragged. It looked like it had been skinned alive, its raw and bloody flesh exposed to the world. The dog was in obvious agony, its eyes filled with terror and pain. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I felt my stomach turn and my heart race as I watched the GIF, my mind reeling with horror and disgust. I wanted to look away, to close the tab and forget what I had seen, but I couldn't. I was transfixed, unable to tear my eyes away from the terrible sight. After what felt like an eternity, the GIF ended and I was left staring at the screen, my heart heavy with sadness and anger. I couldn't believe that someone would do something so cruel and heartless to an innocent animal. It hurt my soul to know that there were people out there who were capable of such monstrous acts of cruelty. I wish I could say that the GIF was the only thing I found on the deep web that disturbed me. But the truth is, I saw many more terrible and shocking things during my time exploring the dark corners of the internet. Animal cruelty was all too common, and I stumbled across countless sites and images that showed innocent animals being subjected to horrific abuse and neglect. It was a wake-up call for me. I realized that the deep web was not a place for the faint of heart, and that the things I saw there would haunt me for a long time to come. I made the decision to stop exploring the deep web, to turn my back on the dark and dangerous world that I had stumbled upon. But the damage was already done. The images of the skinned dog and the other innocent animals I had seen would stay with me, a constant reminder of the cruelty and evil that existed in the world. I wished that I had never seen those things, that I had never ventured into the dark and twisted world of the deep web. Looking back, I realized that my curiosity and fascination with the taboo and gory side of the deep web was misguided and foolish. I should have known better than to seek out such disturbing and python. I remember the day I stumbled upon that site like it was yesterday. I was mindlessly scrolling through the internet, trying to distract myself from the crushing weight of my own grief. My baby, my beautiful, perfect baby, had been stillborn just a week earlier. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I could barely breathe. I was lost in a haze of pain and despair. And then I found it. A website dedicated to women like me, who had experienced the unimaginable tragedy of stillbirth. I clicked on the link with a mix of hope and trepidation. I needed to connect with others who understood my pain, who had been through the same hell that I was living in. But I also knew that this was a dark and painful corner of the internet, a place where the rawest and most vulnerable emotions were on display. As I scrolled through the site, I was struck by the sheer volume of stories and pictures. There were so many women who had lost their babies, so many families who had been torn apart by this senseless tragedy. I felt a strange mixture of comfort and sadness as I read through the posts, seeing my own pain and loss reflected back at me from the screen. But then something strange happened. The site started to feel off. The background music, which had been soft and soothing at first, suddenly turned jarring and discordant. The pictures of the stillborn babies, which had been initially heartbreaking, began to take on a disturbing quality. They were dressed up in clothes, posed in positions that seemed unnatural and almost grotesque. I felt a chill run down my spine as I continued to scroll, the creeping sense of unease growing stronger with every passing moment. The song that had been playing in the background suddenly became the focus of my attention. It was a haunting melody, full of sorrow and despair. But there was something else there too, something dark and twisted. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew that something was very, very wrong. Suddenly, I realized what it was. The song wasn't just sad, it was celebratory. It was a twisted celebration of death and loss, a celebration that seemed to revel in the tragedy and pain of these women and their families. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized what I was listening to, what this site had become. I quickly closed the tab, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt violated, betrayed. How could anyone do something like this, turn a site dedicated to grief and loss into something so twisted and sick? I felt a deep sense of anger and disgust, aimed not just at the creators of the site but at the world itself. How could anything be so cruel, so heartless? I knew I needed to tell someone, to share what I had seen. But who? Who would believe me? Who would understand? I felt isolated, alone in my pain and anger. I realized that I had stumbled upon something dark and sinister, something that I couldn't ignore or forget. And so, I began to write. I poured my heart out onto the page, describing in vivid detail the sight and the emotions it had stirred up in me. I wrote about the pictures, the music, the twisted celebration of death. I wrote about the grief and pain that I was still struggling with, the overwhelming sense of loss that threatened to consume me. As I wrote, I felt a sense of release, a catharsis that I hadn't experienced in weeks. It was like I was purging the darkness from my soul, exposing the twisted underbelly of the site for all to see. I knew that I couldn't change what had happened, couldn't bring back my baby or erase the pain of the past week. But I could take control of my own narrative, tell my own story in my own words. And so, I continued to write. I wrote about my experiences with pregnancy and loss, the hopes and dreams that had been shattered by stillbirth. I wrote about the love and support of my family and friends, the way they had rallied around me in my time of need. I wrote about the anger and frustration I felt towards the world, the way it had seemed to turn its back on me in my time of need. As I wrote, I began to feel a sense of purpose, a drive to share my story and help others who had been through the same thing. I knew that my pain and loss were not unique, that there were countless other women and families who had experienced the same thing. I wanted to reach out to them, to connect with them and offer what comfort and support I could. And so, I began to share my writing. I posted it on social media, sent it to friends and family, and even submitted it to a few online publications. I was nervous, of course, afraid that my words would be met with silence or worse, mockery. But to my surprise and delight, people responded. They reached out to me, shared their own stories of loss and grief, and offered their support and love. I realized that by sharing my story, I had found a community, a group of people who understood my pain and loss in a way that no one else could. We were bound together by a shared experience, a bond that transcended race, religion, and nationality. We were a family, connected by our shared heartbreak and our shared desire to heal. And so, I continued to write and share. I wrote about the healing power of community, the way it can help us to move forward even in the face of unimaginable loss. I wrote about the importance of self-care, of taking the time to grieve and heal in our own way. And I wrote about the resilience of the human spirit, the way we can find hope and light even in the darkest of times. As I wrote, I began to feel a sense of peace, a calmness that had eluded me for weeks. I knew that I would never forget my baby, that the pain of loss would always be with me. But I also knew that I was not alone, that I was part of a larger community of people who understood and supported me. I felt a sense of purpose, a drive to share my story and help others who had been through the same thing. And so, I continued to write. I write for myself, for my baby, and for the countless other women and families who have experienced the tragedy of stillbirth. I write to heal, to connect, and to find hope in the darkness. And I hope that my words will bring comfort and support to those who need it, just as they did for me. I had always been a curious person, so when I stumbled upon Matthew Santora's YouTube video about the deep web, I was immediately intrigued. I had heard rumors about the shadowy corners of the internet where you could buy and trade all sorts of illicit goods and services, but I had never really given it much thought. However, as I listened to Matthew explain how to access the deep web, I felt my heart start to race with excitement. I followed Matthew's instructions to the letter, downloading the necessary software, and configuring my computer to hide my IP address. It took several hours, but finally, I found myself staring at the infamous deep web homepage. Matthew had been right. It looked just like the normal internet, but with one crucial difference. Here, anonymity was king, and people could buy and sell anything they wanted without fear of repercussions. At first, I was hesitant to explore too deeply. I knew that there were dangerous people and organizations operating in the deep web, and I didn't want to put myself in unnecessary danger. But as I began to poke around, I discovered that there were entire marketplaces dedicated to all sorts of illegal goods. Guns, drugs, people, it was all for sale, just a few clicks away. I was both fascinated and repulsed by what I saw. On the one hand, it was incredible to think that such a shadowy underworld existed just beneath the surface of the internet we all knew and used every day. On the other hand, it was deeply unsettling to know that there were people out there who would traffic in human misery without a second thought. Despite my reservations, I couldn't help but feel drawn deeper into the dark heart of the deep web. I told myself that I was just curious, that I needed to see more to truly understand the scope of this hidden world. But as I clicked through forum after forum, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. It was one thing to read about the deep web on YouTube, or in a news article. It was quite another to actually see it in action. The things I saw on those forums, the cruelty, the depravity, the sheer inhumanity of it all made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe that people could be so heartless, so devoid of empathy and compassion. And yet, despite my disgust, I couldn't tear myself away. I told myself that I was doing important research, that I needed to bear witness to these atrocities in order to better understand the world around me. But deep down, I knew that I was lying to myself. I was drawn to the darkness, compelled by some morbid fascination that I couldn't quite explain. And then, one day, I went too far. I stumbled upon a forum that was dedicated to the most heinous, unspeakable acts imaginable. I won't go into detail here, but suffice it to say that what I saw on that forum will haunt me for the rest of my life. I was physically sick, retching and dry-heaving as I frantically scrolled through page after page of horrors. I couldn't believe that such a place could exist, that there were people out there who could commit such monstrous acts. I felt a deep, burning anger rise up within me, a righteous fury that threatened to consume me whole. I knew that I had to do something, had to take action against these monsters who were operating with such impunity in the deep web. I reported the forum to the authorities, providing them with all the information I had managed to gather. I spent hours on the phone with FBI agents, telling them everything I knew about the deep web and the people who used it for evil purposes. But even as I spoke to the agents, I knew that it wasn't enough. The deep web was vast and shadowy, a seemingly infinite labyrinth of forums and marketplaces that were all but impossible to police. I knew that I could never truly stamp out the darkness that lurked within its depths. And so, I made a decision. I would never again access the deepest corners of the deep web. I would never again subject myself to the horrors that lay just a few clicks away. I would focus instead on the light, on the good and the beautiful and the true. It hasn't been easy. There are days when I still feel that old pull, that morbid curiosity that threatens to draw me back into the depths. But I resist, reminding myself of the things I saw and the people I spoke to. I remind myself that there is evil in the world, and that it is our duty as human beings to stand against it, to fight for what is right and just and good. And so I carry on, a little wiser and a little warier than I was before. I know that the deep web is still out there, a dark and terrible mirror reflecting the worst impulses of human nature. But I also know that there is light, and that it is our duty to seek it out, to nurture it and protect it and let it guide us through the darkness. I have seen things that cannot be unseen, heard stories that cannot be unheard. I have felt the weight of human suffering and the terrible burden of knowledge. And yet I know that I am lucky, that I have been given a rare and precious gift, the gift of insight, of understanding. I will never forget what I saw in the deep web, those dark and terrible corners that exist just beneath the surface of our world. But I will not let it consume me, either. I will carry it with me, a constant reminder of the fragile beauty of our world and the importance of fighting for what is right. So to anyone who is considering exploring the deep web, I offer this warning: proceed with caution, and be prepared for the things you may find. The deep web is a dark and terrible place, full of corruption and cruelty and unspeakable horrors. But it is also a place of light and beauty, if you know where to look. Choose wisely, and remember that what you find in the depths may change you forever. I was hunched over the keyboard, fingers flying across the keys, a strange thrill coursing through me. The words on the screen were chilling, but they were also strangely alluring. The forum was called The Feast, and it was a digital haven for the darkest, most macabre fantasies, cannibalism. I had stumbled upon it accidentally, a rabbit hole of morbid curiosity I couldn't seem to escape. At first, it felt wrong, almost sickening. But as I delved deeper, I felt a strange pull, a fascination with the forbidden. Each post was a glimpse into a warped world, a world where flesh was a feast, and the act of eating another human was not just a taboo, but a perversely alluring ritual. The usernames were cryptic, often referencing body parts or acts of consumption. Ribs and gristle, carnivorous cravings, bite me, and devour desire were just a few examples. Their posts were a mixture of dark humor, graphic descriptions, and philosophical musings on the nature of life, death, and consumption. One post, titled Fresh Meat Calling, caught my eye. It read, "I need someone to eat my fresh meat. I am juicy and tender, seasoned with a healthy dose of adrenaline. Hit me up if you're interested. Let's make a meal out of this night." The writer's username was Sated Soul, and their avatar image was a black silhouette against a blood-red background. The post had several replies, each offering the same chilling promise: "I'm hungry," or "You sound delicious." I was transfixed. The forum was no longer just a morbid curiosity. It had become a dark mirror reflecting the darkest corners of my own imagination. The thought of being consumed, of being part of a gruesome ritual, was both horrifying and exhilarating. Over the next few weeks, I became a regular visitor to the feast, lurking in the shadows, reading the grotesque conversations, and finding myself strangely drawn to the darkness. It felt like a forbidden fruit, a taste of the forbidden, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt before. Then, one post caught my eye. It was from a new user named Crimson Craving. A single sentence, but it sent chills down my spine. "I want to be eaten." The post was a beacon in the darkness, an invitation I felt compelled to answer. I typed a reply, a simple "Y," and hit send. The response was almost instantaneous. Because I want to feel what it's like to be on the other side. To know the ultimate surrender. The words resonated with a deep, primal urge within me. I was captivated, drawn into a dangerous game. The forum, once a voyeuristic pastime, was now a gateway to a macabre reality. We exchanged messages, slowly building a connection based on a shared morbid fascination. The fear was there, a constant current beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of thrill. Crimson Craving's messages were filled with graphic descriptions of their desired fate, their body as a sacrifice, a meal for the hungry. I found myself fantasizing about it, imagining the taste of their flesh, the feeling of their final moments, the ritualistic act of consumption. Our online conversations led to private messages, then to video calls. We saw each other's faces, their real identities shrouded in anonymity, but their eyes, they held the same dark fascination. The fear became a shared thrill, a shared secret. After weeks of digital courtship, Crimson Craving proposed a meeting. A remote cabin in the woods, hidden from civilization, the perfect setting for our dark ritual. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. The drive to the cabin was a blur. The forest was dense and silent, the air thick with the smell of pine and decay. I felt a sense of dread as I parked the car, the engine humming a silent goodbye. We met at the edge of the clearing. Crimson Craving was even more captivating in person. Their dark eyes, the way they moved, their voice, it was like stepping into a nightmare. The cabin was small and cramped, the only light coming from a flickering fireplace. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else, something metallic and pungent. The fear was palpable now, a cold dread that wrapped around me like a shroud. Crimson Craving spoke first, their voice low and seductive. "You're here. You're ready." I nodded, my throat dry. We were in a strange trance, both of us caught in the web of our own desires. I looked around the cabin, noticing the knives, the meat hooks, the tools of our ritual laid out on a table. It felt surreal, like a scene from a horror movie, and I was playing the role of the victim. Crimson Craving smiled, a chilling, sadistic smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "It's going to be beautiful," they whispered, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but the thrill, the strange, twisted excitement, was still there, pulling me towards the abyss. I was ready to be consumed, to experience the ultimate surrender, to become one with the darkness. The night unfolded in a haze of fear and fascination. The details are a blur, a mosaic of pain and pleasure, of fear and submission. I was both victim and participant, a willing sacrifice, a vessel of forbidden desire. When it was over, I lay on the cold floor, my body exhausted, my mind reeling. I vaguely remember driving home, the forest a blur of shadows, the silence deafening. I felt empty, hollowed out, like a shell of my former self. I never went back to the feast. The forum felt tainted, a symbol of a dark path I had walked. I deleted my account, but I couldn't erase the memory of that night, the taste of blood and fear, the feeling of being consumed. The experience left me forever changed. I walk with a shadow, a constant reminder of the darkness I encountered, the depths of human desire. The forum still exists, a digital haven for the depraved, a testament to the darkest corners of the human soul. And I, the survivor, carry the scars of a night I can never forget. It was a horrifying, exhilarating, and above all, a transformative experience. The line between sanity and madness had blurred, and I walked a tightrope between the two, forever haunted by the night I was consumed.